Translator, Neditor, Dark Gem. Chin Mu and Pangong So strode forth shoulder to shoulder, leaving jade fragrance floor behind them. They followed the long street out of the capital, their figures advancing unhurriedly beneath the open sky. Early spring in the capital still carried a biting chill. Even at high noon, the sun hung low in the southern heavens, pale and distant, its light neither fierce nor dazzling. The city in spring remained lively, with crowds flowing like an unending current. Young masters and young ladies of noble houses gathered in groups to stroll the avenues, most clad in sable fur cloaks. The soft, lustrous fur framed their fair faces, setting off their skin like snow against dark silk. In past years, by this season, many wealthy clans would have boarded their flying ships and journeyed south to escape the winter's cold, returning only when spring ripened towards summer. Yet this year was different. A natural calamity had turned the southern lands as frigid as the north, perhaps even colder. Thus most chose to remain in the capital. Amid natural disasters and man-made upheavals, nowhere seemed safer than the imperial city itself. Chin Mu and Pangong So walked with deliberate slowness, each silently adjusting his state. Pangong So was without doubt a formidable figure, one who had reincarnated 19 times and lived through 20 lifetimes. In short order, he tuned his essence, qi, and spirit to their peak. Chin Mu, by contrast, was still steadily harmonizing his own. A thread of murderous intent seeped from Pangong So and locked onto Chin Mu as his steps gradually quickened. That killing intent pressed directly upon Chin Mu, forcing him to respond. He had no choice but to alter his gait, to subtly shift his posture so as not to reveal the slightest flaw. Back in Imperial College, Chin Mu had once done the same to him, using intent to compel him to hobble, bending his frame in motion so no weakness could be seized. Thus, Chin Mu had been denied any opening. Now Pangong So returned the favor, driving his aura to its summit and pressing down like a mountain. He sought to drag Chin Mu into his rhythm, to make him change in accordance with every fluctuation of his own presence. So long as Chin Mu was forced to follow that rhythm, Pangong So would retain the initiative. Chin Mu would sink into passivity, wearied by constant adjustment. To avoid exposing a flaw, he would have to alter his trajectory again and again, modulating his aura without cease. The longer the road, the more the changes, and when the variations surpassed the youth's knowledge and horizons, he would no longer be able to adapt. When they reached the outskirts, killing Chin Mu would require but one or two moves. Old fox. Chin Mu's expression turned grave. Before him stood a being of terrifying depth. Such was Pangong So. Whether stronger than his foe or not, the moment advantage lay within reach, he would seize it and amplify it to the utmost. 10,000 years of tempering had dulled his susceptibility to external disturbance. Every word and every motion flowed from the experience he had accumulated over those endless years. That experience had become like runes and principles, etched into his very marrow, guiding every step and breath. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor and Blind, had once spoken of uniting knowledge and action. Oldma had spoken of abiding by the rules. Through 10,000 years of accumulation, Pangong So had attained that state. Chin Mu, however, held his own understanding of unity between knowledge and action. To know yet not act was insincerity. To act yet fail was incapacity. To act because one knows, this was the heart of utmost sincerity. To succeed in that action was to carry it through to the end. At that point, one was scarcely swayed by people or circumstance. Yet the foundation of unity lay in pursuing knowledge to its ultimate end, investigating principles to their root and making them one's own. Consider cooking, to refine the craft until color, fragrance, and flavor left nothing to be desired. Consider construction, to erect buildings and pavilions sturdy, elegant, and practical, majestic in appearance and unyielding to storm or quake. Consider shipbuilding, to grasp fully the principles of hull and keel, selecting sound materials so the vessel would not founder amid wind and waves. This was pursuing knowledge to its end, studying one thing to its extreme, comprehending every principle that underlay it. Only then could knowledge and action become one. Pangong So was precisely such a man. Reincarnating time and again, he had cultivated countless arts to their limits. All that he learned became his foundation, fused into his speech and bearing. Every word he spoke and every gesture he made bore hidden depth. From the first moment Chin Mu met him, He had already been drawn into Pan Gongso's tempo, from the provocation outside Hall of Six Directions to the leisurely conversation within Jade Fragrance Floor. It had all been threads in a vast web, woven meticulously to ensnare him. Now, as they walked from the city, the spider reeled in its silk. Invisible threads coiled around Chinmu, tightening with every step, shrinking the space in which he could maneuver. Once beyond the city walls, the great spider would bare its fangs and inject venom into its prey. Never had Chinmu encountered such a dreadful opponent. Dowsy, Fozi, even the great experts of celestial being realm and life and death realm who once hunted him, none compared to Pan Gongso. Already Chinmu was forced to hobble, his body swaying slightly from side to side, while Pan Gongso's stride grew ever steadier. He was driving Chinmu to exhaust all variations, compelling him to reveal every possible change just to avoid error. When those changes ran dry, death would follow. To cross hands with such a terrifying existence is a rare opportunity. Suddenly, Chinmu halted. In that instant of stillness, hundreds of flaws bloomed across his body. So many it seemed every inch held a fatal opening. Pan Gongso started slightly and also stopped. For a heartbeat, he felt the urge to strike. Those flaws were mortal in his eyes. A single blow could end Chinmu. Yet he hesitated for a breath. Chinmu was the Heavenly Devil cult master. The Heavenly Devil cult was the foremost sect in the mortal realm. If he slew Chinmu here, escaping their vengeance would be no simple matter. In that fleeting hesitation, the myriad flaws upon Chinmu vanished. His aura erupted, murderous intent surging forth to overwhelm Pan Gongso. As he lifted his leg and strode ahead, Pan Gongso's expression darkened. He had no choice but to give chase, forced into passivity. Chinmu had seized upon that moment of hesitation to overturn his disadvantage. Though his experience was clearly inferior, he possessed a keen, razor-edged spirit long eroded from Pan Gongso. Through endless reincarnations, the sharp resolve of Pan Gongso's first life had been worn away by time. Now, within Chinmu, he glimpsed once more that essence of unyielding drive. The roles reversed. Pan Gongso was now pressed to follow Chinmu's tempo. Their body, techniques, and auras shifted incessantly, each alteration subtle yet precise. As they walked, however, Pan Gongso's swaying grew broader, like a drunkard staggering down the road, drawing curious glances. To onlookers, it appeared as though Chinmu were leading a drunken youth of 13 or 14 with an invisible cord. Such was the duel of experts. When strength was evenly matched, a single lapse could reverse the tide. Chinmu had exploited Pan Gongso's reluctance to act within the city to seize control. Though no blows had yet been exchanged, their clash of wits had long begun. Even after reversing the situation, Chinmu did not relax. As Pan Gongso had said, he had not yet fortified his Six Directions realm. Though they entered it simultaneously, Pan Gongso bore the experience of 20 lifetimes, having broken through the Six Directions realm 20 times. In a single day, he could consolidate it and mobilize its full potential. Chinmu, by contrast, still needed time to familiarize himself and to learn to wield its power. Most crucially, he lacked time to cultivate it now. He possessed the circulation diagrams for Six Directions Realm and Seven Stars Realm, one from the first hall of Imperial College, the other inscribed upon a stone tablet in Roland's Golden Palace. Yet to comprehend the Unity technique, he needed to fuse Overlord Body, Three Elixir technique with great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. Pan Gongso would never grant him the time to merge them. Chinmu's mind sank into his Six Directions divine treasure. Within it, he beheld his spirit embryo. He saw the five element stars and the shrine suspended in the heavens, sensing the five elements star sovereigns. From the vantage of the spirit embryo, he perceived the four quarters of heaven and earth. Upon entering Six Directions realm, one was required to unify these three great divine treasures. The technique must course through all three, forming a single complete body. Within his Six Directions divine treasure lay the four directions of heaven and earth, amplifying his magic power and enabling divine arts. It was a qualitative leap, yet lacking the circulation diagram for Six Directions realm of the Overlord Body. Three Elixir technique remained his greatest flaw. At last, they left the capital and reached the outskirts. Pan Gongso's swaying grew increasingly exaggerated, yet within each motion, his changes were inexhaustible. He maintained perfection without a single mistake. Chinmu could not help but admire him. From city center to outskirts, Pangong So had displayed dozens of body techniques, each cultivated to its utmost intricacy. When he moved as a dragon, he seemed a true dragon traversing the earth. When as a tiger, he exuded the aura of a fierce predator. In phoenix form, he skimmed low like a crimson bird of flame. In fish form, he swam against the current with fluid grace. How could one person refine so many techniques to such perfection? They moved farther and farther. Their murderous intent thickened like gathering storm clouds. From Chinmu's Tao sack, a sword pellet flew forth, along with Junior Protector's sword, which hung at his waist. The two pig-slaughtering knives on his back dropped, plunging into the earth with only their hilts exposed, more than 30 yards apart. His bamboo cane stabbed into the ground. His iron hammer thudded down beside it. From his sleeve slipped brush, ink, paper, and inkstone scattering across the grass. As he walked, his body trembled. Heavy iron weights fell from chest and back. The iron boots upon his feet burst apart, and the weights bound to his legs dropped away. His body grew light. His bones crackled like thunder. His aura surged once more like a rising tide. Pangong So continued matching his tempo. The surge of Chinmu's aura pressed even harder upon him, yet he endured without revealing the slightest flaw. In the distant grasslands, fresh green shoots had already sprouted. Couples strolled hand in hand upon the verdant expanse, enjoying the spring outing. Children ran laughing as they flew kites. Young men showed off their body techniques, leaping skyward in a few steps to tread upon kites aloft, drawing cries of admiration from the girls below. Those cries gradually faded as attention shifted to the two strange youths, Chinmu and Pangong So. Birds in the forest burst into flight, fleeing far away, startled by the murderous intent radiating from the pair. When they reached the banks of Mud River, countless large fish suddenly leapt from the water, splashing frantically toward the river's heart, turning the surface into a boiling tumult. At the instant birds took wing and fish broke the water, a child nearby shut his eyes and opened his mouth in a loud wail. Amidst that piercing cry, Chinmu and Pangong So, standing by the riverbank, unleashed their moves at almost the same moment. Translator. Ninetales. Editor. Dark Gem. All manner of runes from the Buddhist scriptures manifested around Chinmu's body, circling and revolving as though a colossal ancient bell had descended to shield him within. The five heavens of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra gradually took form, and the sonorous chant of Buddha voices echoed through heaven and earth, enveloping him in sacred resonance. At the same instant, he set the 9 dragon monarch technique into motion. From the 9 immense dragon veins that coiled beneath the capital, dragon chi surged forth in torrents, converging upon him and elevating his aura yet another level. The 9 dragon monarch technique was the imperial family's supreme art, personally imparted to him by Emperor Yanfeng. Under Chinmu's command, the dragon chi erupting from the 9 dragon veins condensed into tangible forms. It even poured into the river, causing dragons to burst forth from the waters and soar skyward before rushing back toward Kinmu. He struck first. At this juncture, regardless of whether Pangong So revealed the slightest flaw, he would be crushed beneath Chinmu's abnormally dense vital chi, a force capable of suppressing every intricate technique. Pangong So would be drowned beneath incomparable might. The most effective way to confront Pangong So was to overwhelm him with raw magical power, not to compete in finesse of moves. Boom. The river detonated as waters surged into the sky, gathering into the form of a colossal Buddha over 30 yards tall. It stood upon the river like a towering mountain of water. Around its body, water dragons coiled and writhed. Its 5 fingers descended like 5 crushing peaks, sweeping down toward Pangong So. The 9 dragons roared in fury as 9 dragon monarch technique fused seamlessly with Tempest of the 9 dragons from Thunderclap 8 strikes. This single strike embodied the vast majesty of Buddhism's divine arts and the invincible authority of the imperial lineage. The 9 dragons lunged toward their prey. Bang! 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 The torrents exceeded the speed of sound, detonating with thunderous explosions, meeting nothing they could not shatter. What is divine art? This is divine art. Chinmu's greatest strength lay in his magical power, which surpassed his peers by several fold. Even venerable monsters like Village Chief would be inferior to him within the same realm. Such magical power was something Pangong So could never hope to rival. Thus, Qinmu sought to crush him through absolute strength, rendering his 11,000 years of cultivation utterly useless. Just as Qinmu's attack was about to erupt in full force, Pangongso's counterstrike arrived. From his hand flew a thumb-sized sword pellet, from which radiant sword lights burst forth in resplendent brilliance. The second writing of the 14 writings of Tao Sword, binding of 5 qi and 3 aeons, rising on the spot, cloud chariots crossing. He directly unleashed the ultimate art of the Tao sect, employing the purest pre-celestial supreme mystery technique to execute the second sword of Tao Sword. Within the sword lights were contained wood, fire, earth, gold, and water, the 5 qi, alongside Heaven Aeon, Earth Aeon, and Water Aeon, the 3 aeons. Heaven Aeon resembled the sun, known as Supreme Yang. Water Aeon resembled the moon, known as Supreme Yin. Earth Aeon was the mediator that harmonized them. When this sword art unfolded, the sword lights constructed the ideal world of the Tao sect, a realm of sword sun, sword moon, sword earth, invigorated by the circulation of the 5 qi. The sword techniques of the Tao sect demanded profound mastery of algebra, using it as their very foundation. They believed all great Tao between heaven and earth could be resolved through mathematics. Their doctrine was 1 produces 2, 2 produces 3, 3 produces all things. In their view, numerals formed the essence of everything in existence. Whether living beings or inanimate objects, all were but wondrous numbers at their core. Thus, the Tao sect had devised the circular Wuji diagram, the Taiji diagram dividing yin and yang, the 4 symbols diagram, the 8 trigrams, and the 64 hexagrams to calculate the great Tao and all phenomena of heaven and earth. When transformed into sword techniques, these diagrams became living pictures perpetually in motion, evolving the myriad beings of the world and unleashing magnificent power. Each writing within the Tao sect's 14 writings of Tao Sword contained an ideal world, exquisite images born of algebra, interpreting the mysteries of heaven and earth. This was the greatest distinction between Tao sect and Buddhism. Tao sect was the school of mathematics. Buddhism was the school of mind. Tao sect disciples often jested among themselves. Your math isn't good. What are you cultivating for? You might as well return home early to carry your baby. The divine arts of the two collided. One was a sword skill divine art. The other combined corporeal body divine art with spell divine art. When they clashed, the spectacle was terrifying. The river's surface quivered as waters floated skyward. The earth itself trembled, as though stirred by a minor quake. The shockwaves sent slender jets of water piercing through riverside willows, while sword chi drilled into rocks, riddling the reefs along the shore with countless holes. Qinmu's heaven-shaking strike crashed into the ideal Tao sect world shaped by Pangongso's sword lights, yet the overwhelming power was gradually dismantled by the mathematics embedded within those lights. Within Pangongso's sword art, something as dry as algebra became enchanting and radiant. Amid the dazzling sword lights, the 9 water dragons and towering water Buddha rapidly disintegrated, unable to withstand even a single blow of the second Tao sword move. Countless sword lights streaked forth, slamming into the Buddha radiance that had formed the immense bell around Qinmu. Ripples spread across the bell's surface before. In the next instant, the colossal bell shattered. Qinmu's expression remained unchanged as his sword pellet returned to his hand. In an instant, sword lights burst forth anew. Instead of sword-treading mountains and rivers, he directly employed the second move of sword picture. Whoosh! One side of Mud River turned crimson as blood-red sword lights surged forward like an endless sea. Within that sea, it seemed an emperor god arose, sword in hand, casting disdainful glances upon all creation. Sword of founding emperor, sea of blood. Tao sword and sword picture collided. Pangongso let out a muffled grunt as the 5 qi and 3 aeons were annihilated instantly. Peerless sword lights, brimming with killing intent, bombarded his face. His body shot skyward like a soaring dragon, executing a wondrous body technique that shifted between swimming fish, darting sparrow, and 9 phoenixes. Yet he could not evade every blade of light. Chi, chai, chai! Crimson streaks burst from his body as he twisted midair, finally landing upon the river's surface with an explosive crash that sent water flying in all directions. Whoosh! Qinmu leaped upward. The sword lights in his grasp vanished as the sword pellet transformed into a massive blade that cleaved open the river's surface. Pangong Tso swung his sword pellet to block, only to hear a string of resounding clashes. He skipped across the river 6 or 7 times like a child's stone before halting his momentum. On the opposite side, Chinmu sprinted across the water. Each step detonated the river's surface, sending plumes skyward. Before Pangong Tso could steady himself, Chinmu had already advanced several hundred yards. The massive blade recoiled, flowing like liquid water to envelop his fist. Chinmu punched. Boom! The river shuddered as green glowing water dragons roared and submerged Pangong Tso dozens of yards away. The river's surface erupted into chaos. 45 dragons burst from that single punch, merging with the river and charging toward Pangong Tso amid endless thunderous blasts. Chinmu leaped skyward, extending all 10 fingers. Palms facing heaven, he pulled downward. Lightning illuminated the river's surface, converging into a single strike that smashed into the center of the 45 dragons. As Chinmu descended, the sword pellet in his hand transformed into countless sword lights, sword-treading mountains and rivers. Those sword lights became towering mountains and flowing rivers descending from the heavens. They crashed into the water, splitting the river across a dozen-yard radius. The upsurging waters broke apart into droplets that formed mountain-like shapes within the river. Beneath the waters, blood sprayed as a figure fled toward the riverbed. Chinmu raised a hand. The junior protector's sword at his waist flew out with a hum. His index finger circled, and the blade spun frantically. Sword chi wrapped around it as it assumed drill sword form, parting the waters to shoot straight to the river's depths, pursuing the trail of blood. Chinmu's shirt fluttered as he gently descended from the sky, stepping upon the churning river surface. Behind him came the belated crash of waves raised by his earlier sprint, now falling from midair and scattering like shards of jade. Upon the river, he shifted his steps. The water around his feet instantly transformed, swirling about him like transparent flood dragons, forming a vast circle. Shoo! Junior Protector's sword burst from the river, still spinning through the air, though gradually slowing. By the time it reached Chinmu, it had ceased its rotation. The sword sheath at his waist flew out, transforming into a fish dragon that opened its jaws and swallowed the blade before returning to his waist once more as a sheath. Chinmu's expression remained placid as he stood in quiet stillness. The sword pellet floated before him like a slightly enlarged droplet of water. Around him, streams of water rose slowly skyward as if rain were falling in reverse. The ascending river water transformed into vapor, forming clouds that spanned dozens of yards. Lightning flashed within those clouds, thunder rumbling. Amid intermittent flashes, faint scales and claws could be glimpsed. Pangong Tso, you have disappointed me. Chinmu's calm voice drifted across the river's surface, indifferent and cold. Does the cultivation of your 19 lifetimes amount only to this? Why do you not dare to emerge? I wait to kill you so I may return to my meal. The dishes will grow cold soon. The river remained motionless. Chinmu frowned and turned, walking back toward the shore. As he retraced his steps, stunned faces surrounded him. The onlookers turned their heads to follow him with their eyes as he departed. Chinmu ignored them. He retrieved the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone he had tossed aside earlier, then noticed the iron hammer. Grasping its handle, he suddenly raised it and smashed it fiercely into the ground. With a thunderous boom, the air before him compressed into a wall before shattering apart. The ground sank and split from the impact. Tremors surged below as a figure fled rapidly underground. Chinmu leaped forward like a streak of wind and reached the bamboo cane in an instant. With a palm strike, he drove it into the earth. Blood spurted from the narrow hole it pierced. He leaped again, arriving before the two pig-slaughtering knives. Inverted, with head downward and legs upward, he seized the handles. As he spun, countless knife lights rained into the soil. His body advanced while spinning, blades carving into the earth like torrential rain and cascading waterfalls. Suddenly, Chinmu spread his legs and slammed the ground with the backs of the knives. Flipping midair, he landed steadily upon his feet. Sheathing the knives behind him, he turned and strode into the capital city. Soon he arrived at Jade Fragrance Floor, entered Green Bamboo Garden, and after circling twice around the statue of Bodhisattva of Compassion, reached the private room. The two great shamans remained inside. Astonishment filled their faces upon seeing him. Are the dishes still warm? Chinmu asked. One great shaman stared at him blankly. The other nodded at once. What about the wine? The wine has turned slightly cold. Chinmu waved his hand. Warm it and bring it to me. You remain to pour.